Thank you. Yes, I am a designer. So I got interested in designing for an aging population actually when I moved here, and I saw it was an opportunity to address issues that hadn't been addressed. So I'm going to first show you some of the products around 10 years ago that I saw. And you can Google this, and you can Google senior products, and this is kind of what comes up. And I think there's something interesting about this. First, can you smell that? Can you smell that whiff of a hospital about them? That kind of nice medical smell that they're always kind of doing. And I'm always wondering, why did that come about? So I've kind of been in on a journey, and I'm going to go with the journey with me to understand why this is happening. Also, there's a designer, Gretchen Anderson, who says, if we look at the products that this age group is using, if it's reflected in what we think about them, a lot of times it's looking like, look at the commode, that cranky. A lot of products are really stupid. And also just really ugly and tacky. And it's almost like when you get these controllers, right? Let's make the buttons and this controller as big as honkin' possible. It's almost like as you get older, you have less of ability, your eyesight's so declining, and all of these things that we experience, products, have so declined that you can't have an aesthetic experience. So I'm going to take you on a journey. And the journey starts here. About 10 years ago, as I introduced a class of design for an aging population, and I had developed an aging suit. And I'll talk a little bit about the suit, but I also had my students design an aging suit. And it was kind of a fun experience for them to understand and empathize what you might find as the physical aspects as you age. Now, during their presentation, they came, and we had talked a lot about ageism, right? I thought I'd done my due diligence. But one of the groups came and decided to get very authentic and pulled out the crazy old man Halloween mask, you know the one, and actually put it on. And they were serious that they wanted to feel more like an older person. It was the exaggerated hair, the crazy eyebrows and things like that. The next group that came on, and they kind of had they'd done all the restriction of the motion. Looks like they went to the far end of the thrift store, found the baggiest and wrinkliest suit they could find, and put it on as this authentic representation of what an older person looks like. And I said, walk down the street, does anybody look like this? And of course not. But it really brought up 2 points. One, I think as designers, we focus on getting the functional things, right? We can make products functionally. That's why they look like these medical sort of things. But we don't have a really good understanding of what these experiences of this age group is, because we really don't have a lot of contact with them, and none of my students did. For me, of course, my aging suit, and I would do these workshops where you would put it on, and I would restrict the motion and things like that, but I inevitably ended up in those workshops restricting the motion to the severest degree so you could actually see it. So I'd restrict the motion with my aging suit, and I'd have the person walking, and they'd be like shuffling, and everybody would be groaning. And of course, what I did, I just reinforced every stereotype about aging. And I now call it my ageist suit. I don't call it my aging, and I actually run workshops where we talk a little bit about aging, because it's kind of fun to understand some of the things that might happen, but it also is a nice segue into talking about ageism. And is this what's going to happen, or is this our fear of what's going to happen? I think that gets referenced through products. The next thing I'll tell you about is another design thing I did with my students that brought up a number of other issues. And we knew that ageism, a way to combat ageism, intergenerational connections, that we don't have a lot of, and my students didn't have a lot of. So we had approached this drop-in center, and some of you may have seen this, and this is the design that the student did, and we did our due diligence. We talked to the kids, we talked to the seniors, and we developed an intergenerational space. What we had designed was not necessarily what they wanted, because we imposed this on the seniors. We imposed this on the group. Now, everybody loved it. I loved it. We all liked the idea of intergenerational space. I loved it. The administration, the board of the drop-in center loved it. The government funded it. They loved it. The school loved it. But there was this subtle undermining of the people. We didn't really talk to them. We didn't ask, did you want it? And a lot of that happens, and it brought up an interesting thing. also another really interesting point about it is this was just window dressing. Really. And a lot of design sometimes is that if you're not dealing with larger issues. And the larger issues, we needed to design an intergenerational experience. That's what needed to happen between the two groups. That's something meaningful. This could support it, but it wasn't the clear thing. So I think a lot of what times happens is, as designers, we're not necessarily designing for the user, for that group. We're designing for the institution, because in fact, our customer was Spencer House, not the people in it. So again, I think that's a little bit of the problem. So out of that came, my next stage was, oh gosh, I've had 2 failures here. What's the next thing I can do? I said, okay, well, let's really send them into people's homes. I think that's the best way. Let's cut out the institution, cut out this, let's go right to the source. And so I sent them in, usually it was around their grandparents, to document a day in the life. And in this documentation, the day in the life was not about people's what they can't do, it was about what they could do. And that was what was interesting. So it wasn't about I can't get my medication. And this is what comes out of it. This is what, across the board, what was important in the day of the life of a lot of their grandparents. Issues like that you wouldn't think about. So, and can we design services? Can we design products? Can we design all sorts of things to facilitate a very positive experience for not just older people, everybody? And again, I think that's the things that come out when you get right to the source and people give voice and you try to understand and both not just hear but listen and see what people are doing. So I've come to the conclusion that really what I had been doing was not designing for an aging population, I was designing for frailty. And what kept on coming out when talking to people and through my experience is people just wanted dignity. And that we need to reimagine designing for dignity, because I think the problem, we're designing for frailty, and here's the problems designers make. We confuse the customer and the user, when in fact we think we're designing for the user, but actually in design, the customer is who's paying, and it's not necessarily the user, and we're meeting their needs, which are not always the user's needs. We're also around functionality, and not really looking at fit. And fit is the aesthetics, that larger thing, and functionality is quite easy. We're also focused on tech fixes as opposed to social fixes. We're really designing around the disability of the person and not the ability. We get pity and empathy mixed up. And we design around dependence and not to design around the independence. And sometimes we need to design for frailty, understand that? But it's about we feel we have to protect, as opposed to I think people just want to feel secure. So here's something that I took this framework and I took it to this very stereotypical commode. And what would that look like if you actually went out and talked to people, the 2 user groups, and there's 2 user groups. There's the caregiver that's doing a lot of the cleaning of it and also the person using it, or sometimes they're the same. Let's talk to them and give them voice about what they would like. And I've done that with a number of things with my Blue Zone design, and there's 6. Here's what they said they wanted. And I can remember, as a designer, I have the skill sets and knowledge to help them visualize their voice. And they probably might look like this. Now, we don't see a lot of this out there, because I don't think we're giving people voice, or we're not even listening to them. So let's go one further here. Let's take a designer from that age group and give them full voice about designing a product. So here's the product, and it's assist. Again, it's a lot of these very stereotypical things to assist you to get into the bathtub. What that might look like if the designer was 70 years old, or between 70 and 80, and dealing with some of the issues that might require this. What would that product look like when you give them full voice? And that's what it looks like to him. This is Michael Graves. He's an architect, very famous. This is about 10 years ago he started to design it. And I think what's interesting is that when you get closer to the voice, the narrative looks a little bit different from what we're seeing. And as designers, we need to try to get closer to visualizing that voice. at the end of the day, I think it works both ways. And what we've also found as the designers, I need that voice to be a little bit louder because I'm not hearing it when I'm doing my designs. And so the onus is on, I can only facilitate certain things because I'm not experiencing any of these issues. I'm just facilitating them. But also, I need that voice to be a bit louder, that the age group is not disengaging from these very important design things that are designing our world. So thank you.